You know, I got this stacked so well, but there's this one little spot right here, this one opening that I couldn't get filled in. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of bugging me. Hello everybody and welcome to Tech Uploaded. I am Chris as always, and the day has finally come. It is time for the X99 Broadwell-E build. Oh, finally, right? So I'm excited. I guess the first step here is to go ahead and run through all of these wonderful components and see what's actually gonna go in this bad boy. So let's do that first. All right, so first up is the Asus X99 A2 Motherboard, and powering this bad boy that's not pictured here is the EVGA Supernova 850G2 gold-rated power supply that I actually carried over from the 4790K build. And then you have the Asus Strix Gaming GeForce GTX 1070 graphics card. Powering that X99 A2 motherboard is going to be an Intel Core i7 Broadwell-E 6850K processor. Sitting in those memory slots on that X99 board is going to be 4 sticks of Corsair Vengeance LPX memory. Those are going to be 8 gigabytes each for a total of 32 gigabytes of 2666 memory, which I'll be overclocking to 2800. For cooling, I've got the Noctua NHD15S and then an additional NFA15 PWM fan, so I can actually set this up in dual fan mode for some extra cooling power. On the storage side, I'm starting with an M.2 PCIe SSD, and that is the Samsung SM951. And then for more solid-state storage, I am carrying over the 500 gigabyte Samsung 840 EVO from the 4790K build. And then the other carryover is going to be my Western Digital Black 4 terabyte mechanical hard drive. For my gaming mouse, I'm using the Corsair Raptor M45, which is also a carryover from the 4790K, but I just liked it so much I figured I would move it over to this system. For something a little different with the typing experience, I decided to go with the Logitech G810 Orion Spectrum mechanical keyboard because it uses a little bit different switch technology. I figured I'd take that for a spin and see how that works out after using MX Browns for as long as I have. And then finally, on the sound side, I'm doing something a little bit different. Instead of using the D1 DAC that I've been using for so long, for the first time in quite a while, I'm actually going with an internal sound card, and in this case, that is the Sound Blaster ZXR. Now, this card is a little bit interesting. Not only do you have the main sound card that goes into your PCIe, but then you have a daughter card that is connected via a ribbon cable for some additional connectivity, and you also have a control base, so you have a volume knob and then easy access to additional inputs for things like microphone and headphone. And then finally, holding everything together is the Fractal Design Define S case, complete with window to show everything off. All right, so here's how this is gonna go down. I've done build videos in a lot of different ways. I've done the really long format where you just see me go step by step by step, and I've done the time lapse. This time, I'm just gonna focus in on the kind of key points throughout the build and kind of show you how each one of those is gonna go, and then we'll do a full run through once the computer is actually done and take a close look at how everything is installed, how everything looks, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do a first boot and see how everything turned out. So, the first step is to get all these boxes and stuff off of the freaking island so that I can get this case set down on its side, get the motherboard out of the box, and start getting the processor mounted, the RAM installed, and move on with step number 1. All right, it's time to get building. So first thing to do is get out the motherboard, because without that, you don't have a whole lot else going on. So take that out of the box and get that anti-static bag off of there. Set it down on the motherboard box itself to keep it safe, and then get that plastic off there. I forgot to do that on my last motherboard. There's some plastic that protects the nice colorized areas of the motherboard to make things nice and clean. Get out the processor, get out the memory, and get to work. It's time to put the main components on the board. So getting out the CPU, now it's time to get those arms lifted up on that 2011 3 socket, and just pull both of those back, lift it up, and you are ready for the 6850K installation. There it is. Now there's an arrow on the CPU. There is an arrow on the socket. You drop them in lined up just like that. It's actually going to look like it's going in upside down, but that is how it goes. Lower down the arm, but leave on that little protective covering there until everything is locked in place. So you're going to lock one side, then you're going to lock the next, and as soon as you're done with that, then you have the pleasure of popping off the little plastic piece, and ooh, ah yes, there is the CPU. Get out the manual, check your memory orientation. In my case, I have 4 sticks, which go in the lighter colored slots. Each one is 8 gigabytes, so once all 4 of them are installed, boom, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 memory is ready to go. Get out your Noctua cooler stuff, get your screws, screw them in, and these are just gonna go in finger tight because the second set of screws that go in actually will hold these down, so don't be too concerned with that. Get out the brackets, drop those in place, nice and easy. Look at that. Now here are the screws that are gonna actually hold everything in place. Look at that. Put those on there finger tight, just like the others. And then when you actually go to tighten these down all the way, that's where you're gonna wanna be a little bit cautious. You may be tempted to over tighten these because, you know, this is holding a big tower, but don't, just get them nice and snug. You don't wanna damage your motherboard. I like to go in a star pattern just to be safe. And then get out the accessories box, get out the standoffs, get out the tool. The standoffs actually are labeled for ATX on the case itself, so you just want to put them in the holes that are properly labeled for an ATX board. Again, you're going to do finger tight first, and then you're going to take your tool and you're going to tighten them down a little bit more. But be careful, once again, I keep reiterating this, don't over tighten these things because they do strip, and if you want to change your motherboard later, that could be a problem, so don't go wild on this one. Get out the I/O shield. These are actually really nice I/O shields because instead of having a bunch of metal sticking out the back, it's just a big thick foam piece. So it makes aligning the motherboard super easy to get everything lined up on that I/O shield. And then the middle standoff actually just sticks up a little bit so that it will grab onto the middle hole in the motherboard and hold everything in place while you get the screws out to put everything else in place. So once again, don't over tighten, just get them snug. And I kind of like to go in a weird order, so I'm not doing like top to bottom or anything like that. I kind of jump around the board when I'm doing the screwing portion of that. And you're done. 850G2 time. Put the power supply in there. Kind of check everything first, make sure it's lining up nicely, all the holes look good, and then tighten everything in. And get that power supply secure. Get out your little tool for putting in your miscellaneous cables for the motherboard and the case. So there's your power, hard drive, LED, all that good stuff that goes in nice and easy. Ah, look at all those cables. That is the beauty of having a modular power supply, is you don't have to see all of those cables. All you have to do is plug in the ones that you need. So in my case with this build, I need just one cable for my GPU. However, I'm going to need 2 cables for CPU power. And then of course, I need a cable for my SATA devices, and then the big, dreaded, bulky cable for the main motherboard power, which is always just a real bear when it comes to cable management, finding where to put that one. And speaking of cable management, while you're back here pulling everything through, this is kind of the time to start thinking about that. Don't be too obsessed with it, but do keep it in mind as you're kind of figuring out where everything is going to go, such as your SATA connections, where you're going to want to run those. Of course, your CPU power connections are more than likely going to be your longest run, so you're going to probably feed those through your top grommet. And as you can see here, it works out really well. They blend in nicely and makes cable management really look nice at the top there. Then plug in your main motherboard power cable and plug in USB 3, and you are good to go. Get out this little fun screw and standoff, and that's for the M.2. So finger tight that down, slide in the M2. Unfortunately, the power supply is kind of hiding this, but push it down, screw it in, boom, 256 gigabytes of M2 storage. The future is now, that looks cool. And then get out the rest of the storage. So you're gonna get your hard drive trays ready there, pretty straightforward on that one. You're gonna have to tuck it into under that lip a little bit and then slide it into the locking area. And then you're going to want to finger tight that screw down and then use your screwdriver to do the rest. Now there is a dedicated place for SSDs on this particular case. I chose not to use it. I used the other tray because I want to keep both hard drives right next to each other. That way I only have to use one SATA power cable, which makes cable management a little bit easier. So you can kind of see it here. I'm going to tighten this one in, and then I'm going to run those SATA cables. And you can see that I only needed one cable in order to be able to plug in both of these drives, which when we go to keep everything organized is very nice. SATA time, go ahead and plug in those, and you're gonna feed that through the proper grommet. You can see I kind of lined everything up best I could there, trying to keep cable management in mind, putting that one under some cables because I know those might get in the way later, feed the other one through, and then look at your motherboard manual and find SATA 0 and SATA 1 on this particular board. It's kind of on its own away from the rest of the SATA connections, so plugging those in up there, snap them both in, boom, done, looking good. And now it's time to clean off the CPU with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Just make sure it's ready to take that thermal paste. This wasn't the cleanest application in the world. I had a little bit of a glob at the top when I was trying to do a line, but you know what? It's not the end of the world. Just don't apply too much thermal paste and you'll be fine. Now, when you put the CPU cooler on, you want to make sure that you can see when I'm tightening here, I'm kind of alternating back and forth. You don't want to tighten down one side all the way because that's going to put too much pressure on one side of the socket. So now I am dealing with the 4-pin fan connection. I probably should have done this first because the cooler was pretty big, and getting these fans in there to the CPU fan and CPU fan optional wasn't the funnest experience, but you can see I'm latching the main fan on, got the secondary fan. This one actually stands up a little bit higher than the center fan just because I want to leave a little bit of breathing room for that memory. So it's gonna be a little bit off center. So if you're kind of OCD about those kind of things, that may bother you a little bit, but it really didn't bother me. So just clamp those onto the cooler and you're good to go. Now you can see this isn't pretty. This is not what you want. This is messy. Boo. Better. That's cable management right there. And those straps that Fractal has on there, those Velcro straps, yes, those worked well. Now, sound card time. You can see that I already put in the GPU there, the 1070. I kind of forgot to show that part, but pretty straightforward. What's weird about the sound card is that daughter card right there. That requires a ribbon cable. So the power cable on the GPU, not a big deal. This ribbon cable, on the other hand, reminds me of why I hated ribbon cables back in the day. They're difficult to deal with and they're kind of hard to hide, but I did find tucking it by the power supply kind of got it out of the way, so it doesn't look too bad. And as you can see, everything looks pretty clean there. Not a whole lot of cableage going on. Lots of room on the right, so plenty of flexibility for doing water cooling down the road. That big CPU cooler is standing there loud and proud, but I think everything came out nice and clean, even with that sound card in there. And that is it. That is one good looking X99 build, if you ask me.
Well, all right, she is all complete, ready to go, ready for the first boot. So that is the big question. Will this bad boy boot up for the first time? Well, to find out, we're gonna have to venture into the office, hook everything back up, and see if this thing boots. Now, a few things to note before moving on to that point. You'll notice I did not install any fans along the top. I actually left all the fans in the system stock as they came from Fractal, and we'll see how that works out. They are not PWM fans, so if they are too loud, I will switch them out. Otherwise, I'm going to leave them be, and we'll just see how things go. Supposedly these fans are super quiet, so we'll see if that holds true. One of the screws broke off in my hard drive, so there's only 3 out of 4 screws holding the hard drive down onto the side bay back here, so hopefully that's not a problem. Thankfully it was one at the top, so it's kind of the way it's pulling down, it's okay, I think. Other than that, any other snags along the building process? Not really. The only issue was that Creative Sound card, that daughter card having a ribbon cable. I haven't had to deal with a ribbon cable in a very long time, and I now remember why I hated ribbon cables. They really get in the way. So I tucked that away best that I possibly could. Cable management around the back was super, super easy. I really didn't even have to use a lot of cable ties, thanks to the provided Velcro ties that come with the Fractal case. They were in pretty much all the right places, and everything just kind of tied down really, really nicely. With this case design, I would recommend using a modular power supply because it helps keep things in the front as far as cables and messes go to a minimum. So that's always good. And routing cables was easy. There were grommets and holes and things in all the places that I needed them to be. So really, the build process, as long as everything boots up okay, couldn't be happier. The usual build I expect in a Fractal case of this size. So now it's off to the office to see if this thing boots. Fingers crossed. Well, all right. As you can see behind me, the X99 Broadwell-E 6850K build is
complete. And looking at the monitor, it does say i7 6850K at 3.6 gigahertz. It is recognizing all 32 gigabytes of memory. It's seeing both the 500 gigabyte SSD and the 4 terabyte Western Digital hard drive, as well as the M.2 drive. So everything is showing up as it should. Now I just need to install Windows, reinstall all my software, get everything ready to go because I've got a lot of editing to do. Not only do I have this video to edit, but the disassembly video, which will already be up by the time you see this one, will actually be edited or have been edited on this machine. This YouTube time thing's kind of messing with my head trying to keep it straight. So yeah, that was my first socket 2011/2011-3 build. I have never done a build on that platform before, whether it was X79 or X99. The last time I did something even remotely similar to that was back when i7 very first came out. And that was when they had the i7-920, and I believe those were pretty beefy chips, if I'm not mistaken, but it's been so long I don't really remember. So yeah, that was actually a very straightforward, easy build. The Fractal case made it so easy. Huge thanks to Fractal for supplying that case for this build and allowing me to play around in it. We are far from done with messing with that case because that big monster Noctua cooler, which thank you Noctua for supplying that as well, will not be in there forever. It'll probably be in there for a while, but eventually I am going to attempt to do a custom water cooling loop in this system and do some other upgrading as well, as far as maybe some GPU stuff and whatnot. So there's plenty to do down the road. The nice thing about having this kind of a platform is there is definitely room for expansion and room to grow, and that was kind of the idea. Not to mention it did free up the 4790K and some other things for the home theater PC rebuild that I'm looking forward to doing as well. So all in all, thanks to everybody for making this build possible. And I just wanted to say this has been a lot of fun. And if you are at all intimidated about building on this platform, you should not be. It was no different than building on anything else. The only thing that was slightly different was mounting the CPU. There's 2 brackets that you have to lift up instead of 1. And the little security thing pops off after you put the chip in. That's pretty much it. That's the only real difference there. So really, it was a joy to do. I'm really excited to play around with this. And this is officially it, the end of the much anticipated and much hyped Broadwell-E X99 build. Right back there. So you know the drill. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click on that subscribe button and give this a like if you so choose. You can follow me on my social media networks like Twitter and Instagram at Tech Uploaded, of course. And I also have a Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/Tech Uploaded. Go figure. And finally, last but not least, if you do want to send me an email, you can do that at techuploaded@gmail.com. You know the drill. Don't be a stranger. Check back soon.